My name's John Kelsey. The Furniture Society is giving me and Michael Hurwitz the 2024 Award of Distinction. Probably I'm unknown to you. I'm a woodworker and a woodturner, but I'm not a famous furniture artist. I'm an amateur. I make for my own friends and family. I don't teach, show, or sell my own work. But I'm also a writer, editor, and photographer, and in the 1970s and 80s I was lucky enough to find myself at the center of a cultural moment. This slideshow, prepared for the Furniture Society conference in Syracuse, New York in June, is my 20th century life in woodworking journalism. I'm recording this on February 28, 2025 at 40 degrees and 0.07611 north and 76 degrees 2650801 west, and it's the 28,748th sunrise in my life. You are here. Well, where is that? My dad's family lived on both sides of the U.S.-Canada border, and so have I. I was born in Alberta, taken to Vancouver as a child, moved to Toronto, to Sacramento, to Cleveland, and to Rochester. Young kids moving around. But I landed in southwestern Connecticut in 1976 at age 30 and lived there 32 years until 2008, except for 1 year in England. And ever since, I've lived in Lancaster, PA. I retired in 2012 at age 66 with my wife Tina to our own Riverside Woods and Meadow, to family and friends, workshop, and wood. And by the time of the Furniture Society June 2025 conference, I'll be 79 years old. So the narrative arc. It begins with my apprenticeship as a journalist and woodworker, and then as a journeyman and entrepreneur, and finally retired. The award of distinction lands on me for work I did 50 years ago as a journeyman. In 1976, at age 30, I became the first editor-in-chief of the then-new black and white fine woodworking magazine. I did that for 8 years in a cultural moment that spawned woodworkers, and when woodworkers peeped out of their solitary workshops, each believing they were perhaps the only or the last of their kind. I tried to enlarge their viewpoints, maybe cross-pollinate them, and in that way I contributed to an upwelling of interest in woodworking of all kinds. In my 50s, as an entrepreneur, I founded a mail-order bookselling company, Cambium Books, specializing in books sourced worldwide of interest to woodworkers and furniture makers, very broadly defined. And at my companion company, Cambium Press, we published books of particular interest to me. Later on, as a freelance editor and project manager, I took on anything that would pay my bills. So, beginnings. I grew up in the West, in Vancouver, BC, which was a very fine place to be 21 years old in 1967, the summer of love. And then in 1968, at age 22, I traveled east to seek my fortune. And I would say big influences on me in my growing up years was my grandfather, Roy Elm, who had built his own shopsmith-style lathe and could make anything. I could only watch and wonder. And in the work I saw going on at University of British Columbia, Bill Reed and Doug Cranmer and other Northwest Coast artists were returning to carving house poles and monumental sculpture. And a piece shown here is Raven discovering the first men in a clamshell on the beach at Rose Spit in Haida Gwaii. A remarkable piece of sculpture in yellow cedar that connects traditional Northwest Coast Indian art to modern art. So my apprenticeship in writing and editing. My journalism apprenticeship began in 1966 at age 20 when I was elected editor-in-chief of the UBC, the thrice-weekly student newspaper at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. I'd been writing poetry and stories, but I really learned how words worked during the next 10 years as a newspaper reporter and desk editor at the Vancouver Sun, the Toronto Globe and Mail, Sacramento Bee, Cleveland Plain Dealer, and finally the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. And meanwhile, in 1969, Barbara Schomer and I got married in Toronto and had our first child, Jennifer, in 1970, our second child, Morgan, in 1974, and our third, Ted, in 1977. So the 60s and 70s, civil rights struggles, burned out cities, assassinations, Vietnam War, Watergate, Richard Nixon, and at work, computer typesetting, bah, it was all too much. It was time to leave the newsroom and find a simpler, more authentic life. How about let's try my lifelong hobby, woodworking? The information landscape at the time was kind of sparse. We had textbooks like John Fire's Cabinet Making and Millwork. I remember how exciting it was to discover the Encyclopedia of Furniture Making in a bookshop in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. I had an old beat-up copy of Fantasy Furniture by Tommy Simpson, which was published in 1968. But it's really hard from this distance to remember or even imagine a world without the internet, and for learning how to make without YouTube. And at the time, there were just a handful of college-level wood furniture schools. There was the Rochester Institute of Technology, there was Rhode Island School of Design, there was the California College of Arts and Crafts, there was Sheridan College in Toronto, and I think a program in Madison, Wisconsin, and I think that was about it. So a major influence in my life was Stephen Hogman. I've met so many great woodworkers, but if I had to pick the one who influenced me the most, it would be that Canadian wood artist. Who died in 1923. Stephen's quick and wide-ranging mind was like nuclear fusion, always 30 years ahead of the rest of us. I had seen his 1974 exhibition postcard, which lured me to travel from Cleveland to Toronto to find, meet, and befriend him. And that was the fall I enrolled as a woodworking and furniture design freshman at the School for American Craftsmen in Rochester. 35 years later, Hogman's 2013 book of projects, which was intermixed with his portfolio photos for Fox Chapel Publishing, was my last major Woodworld book project. So my career in woodworking publishing was kind of both influenced by and bracketed by Stephen Hogman. My woodworking apprenticeship, I'd been a lifelong hobbyist, but my true apprenticeship began at the School for American Craftsmen at RIT, where my teachers were Bill Kaiser, Ian Kirby, Doug Sigler, Craig McCart, and John Brooks, and of course the other students. And after 2 years as a woodworking and furniture design student, I'd planned to return to Vancouver and open a workshop. But I'm still a journalist. I'd been keeping careful notes and photos of the amazing things I saw and learned at school, and the things shown here are all things I made when I was a student. At school, my biggest question was how to design. I learned that drawing and photography were the designer-maker's best tools for developing and exploring ideas. You draw to figure out what you're going to make, then you make it, and then you draw and photograph how it worked out, and then you think and you repeat. Stephen Hogman showed me that, and it was emphasized at school. That's my work on the left, and Stephen's on the right. Stephen drew everything, and I try to do the same thing. The other students at RIT were a huge influence. The School for American Craft was exciting, yeasty, and challenging, but what the other students were doing was as interesting as my own work, and their work built upon and cut much deeper than our formal curriculum. And here you can see the wood sculptor Howard Werner in a recent photograph in a gallery exhibition of his work from whole logs, and Pegasus A by David Gross, who a senior student at the time. It was built in the next bedroom. So anyone who thinks studio furniture hadn't begun in the mid-70s only needs to see this piece to understand. Another major influence on my life was Albert Lee Koff. I was playing at the lathe in the RIT workshop one day in '75 when Albert came to visit. We had a lot of fun turning wood together, and from beginnings like that, Albert went on to organize a long series of wood turning events and publications, and ultimately created the Center and now Museum for Art and Wood in Philadelphia. Albert showed me the value of luring woodworkers out of the shop to meet together, to share ideas and techniques, and to enjoy one another. In wood turning, Albert was the hand that touched the hand, master to apprentice, back to the beginning of time. And he's shown in this photograph in the checkered shirt to in the upper left, watching his mentor, Manny Erez, demonstrate spindle turning at his second wood turning symposium held at the George School near Philadelphia. Major connection in my career and life was Paul Roman. He visited RIT in 1975 looking for material, for his proposed magazine, which then was called the Cabinet Maker's Journal, but soon renamed Fine Woodworking. I was ready. The class assignment was a rocking animal. We had 2 little kids at the time, so I turned a 2-seater camel from walnut logs that I'd found on a farm road. And I wrote something in every Fine Woodworking issue, and my rocking camel was featured in issue number 2, 1976. It was my first big magazine sale, and also an early declaration of my own interests and intentions. And I still hear from people about that. So wood-turned furniture, monumental wood turnings, inside-out wood turnings, multi-axis wood turning represents a turn not taken for me. In 1976, I had made a large lathe from salvaged parts had 2 belt speeds and a 4-speed reversing gearbox. It could swing a 39-inch table inboard between centers. I started with a porch post lathe and then made an armature apparatus and blocks to hold it all in the right orientation out of laminated blocks of maple. So if I'd gone into the furniture business, influenced by Hogmann and Lee Koff, I would have gone in this direction, lathe-turned furniture. By the end of 1976, Roman had hired me to become the editor of Fine Woodworking magazine while he could turn his attention to building the business. Written and edited by woodworkers for woodworkers, Fine Woodworking hit big in a cultural moment when many shared my yearning for a simpler and better life through hands-on trades and crafts. There was a huge thirst to learn, and our mission was to deliver solid, pertinent information and to show isolated woodworkers what others were making and doing. Pre-internet, we listed events, had for sale classified ads, help wanted ads, tools wanted ads, wood for sale ads, and most importantly in that time, we answered all of the reader mail. These publications fostered community and they opened information windows, and we had the entire domain to ourselves. And shown here is the cover I shot for issue number 5 at Wendell Castle's shop. Wendell had allowed me to document his stack lamination process, to my knowledge the first time anybody had done so. And I saw that article, a cover article and lead story, as a signal to the emerging community of furniture artists, a signal that we're on it, we're going to cover this kind of work. So we had to map the domain. I used an endless succession of maps like this with file cards and post-its to figure out what we would cover and where we were going, and to resolve the contradictions in assembling a magazine written by professional wood artists but catering to an audience of amateurs and beginners. We wanted to cover furniture, of course, and built-ins and regular plywood box cabinet making, but we also wanted to cover such adjacent fields as carpentry and joinery and boat building, musical instruments, scientific instruments, sculpture. And we also wanted to cover specialties such as turning, carving, veneering, and finishing. And we knew that everyone thought that they were the main line, and we also quickly figured out that the workshop and wood was really the only thing that everyone had in common. It was the hinge pin. Whatever you were making, you had to have a place to do it, and some kind of workshop, and some wood, of course. So we made sure to cover setting up shop, building tools, making tools, refurbishing old tools and machines, harvesting your own wood, every topic we could find that would appeal to the broadest cross-section through this whole very complex domain. And I had my own agenda, and so did others. In the beginning, I'd assumed that Fine Woodworking's readers were just like me. They all had workshops, they all needed to know about wood joinery, hand tools, machines, and finishing, and we delivered a full technical sequence with many variations for making furniture elements such as boxes, tables, and stands. But I also made sure to explore foundational skills like frame and panel, mortise and tenon, and old ways including coopering and bodgering, adjacent fields such as lutherie and timber frame carpentry, and new techniques such as stack lamination, router inlay, and laminate bending. My colleagues had strong interests of their own: green woodworking, carving, marquetry, small shop cabinet making. Hey, the bubble might burst at any moment. We could go down. Let's cram it all into 75 dense editorial pages 6 times a year. And the illustration here is a back cover by Jerry Osgood, which was in the middle of a series of articles that he contributed on the methods he'd devised for making curved forms, curved linear forms, and curved panels, using veneers and tapered laminations and glue-ups to get the kinds of shapes that he's known for. Techniques like these were really the foundation for much of the studio furniture that came afterward. Fine woodworking became famous for its illustrations. The art directors Roger Barnes and Deborah Fillion developed new ways of integrating photos and drawings to make coherent and pertinent diagrams that could convey very complex information. Rick Mastelli began to experiment with video, and this was all pre-computer. So what I had learned about the importance of drawing and photography carried right on through to what we were doing now. And fine woodworking would have been nothing without the contributing editors that Paul Roman recruited and I cultivated. The Pennsylvania maker Andy Marlowe gave us a deep connection to traditional American furniture and became a good friend of mine as well. The Danish import Tay Frid had developed the furniture program at RIT, and then in these years did the same thing at Rhode Island School. He connected us to the European tradition and the hand that touched the hand at the beginning of time. And Professor Bruce Hoadley at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst took on popularizing wood science and technology for the broad masses. Frid's 3 books, Tay Frid Teaches Woodworking, are still in print, and I think they're in a combined volume now. This is 50 years further on. I did not work on the books. Frid worked with Roseanne Summerson and John Dunnigan to create the material. I saw it as it came into the office and mined it for magazine articles. Usually I had to go back to Frid for more and different photography, because a standalone magazine article is not really the same as a chapter or a section in an ongoing book. Bruce Hoadley's book about wood and the way wood and moisture interact and what you could do about it was absolutely mind-blowing to most people. People had a lot of empirical knowledge about that, but not very much actual scientific fact. We covered all the great ones. Our team of editor photographers traveled everywhere to produce stories by and about everyone then famous. Wendell Castle, George Nakashima, Sam Maloof, Art Carpenter, John Makepeace, Tay Frid, Bob Stocksdale, Vladimir Kagan, James Krenov, Jerry Osgood, and not to mention many others not yet famous: David Ellsworth, Roseanne Summerson, Frank Klaus, Toshio Odate, John Alexander, Drew Langsner. If you wanted to write for us, we were likely to send an editor to meet with you and help you get some great photos. And I think my cover article in number 14 about George Nakashima was probably the first time that anybody had actually written about Nakashima's process, as opposed to purely admiration articles about the results he got from his enormous slabs of walnut. And Sam Maloof, of course, was a marvel, a hero of the American Crafts Council, marvelous craftsman, methods all his own, very nice guy, and his beautiful chairs still, when they come up for auction, they sell for easily 6 figures. And our amazing readers. Later in 1976, we invited the readers to send in photos of their best work for publication in a book we intended to repeat every 2 years, and ultimately we did make 8 books, although the 2-year schedule fell apart. The response was overwhelming and utterly mind-blowing, and so were the sales figures for that first black and white volume. The range of work and the quality of work we had hoped, but who knew? Believe the second book or the third, and everyone thereafter was published in full color with ever-increasing photo quality, and of course the hidden bonus was a gold mine for authors and story ideas. Another influence was James Krenov. Krenov's first book, A Cabinet Maker's Notebook in 1976, hit us hippie woodworkers right in the gut. He made it okay to slow down and take the time to make it right and lovely and good, and maybe earn your living some other way. Krenov had been trained in Sweden at the Malmsten School, and he developed a masterful eye for wood figure and color. His delicate and diminutive showcase cabinets offer the user subtle and rare delights. Around that time, Krenov and Jerry Osgood established the furniture program in artisanry at Boston University, and Krenov later founded and settled into the ongoing woodmaking and furniture program at the College of Redwoods in Fort Bragg, California. Krenov's writing emerged as audio tapes that needed to be transcribed and distilled. He was a difficult author to work with, mercurial, prickly, and meticulous, but he was well worth the trouble. His article on showcase cabinets in 1979 was actually his second appearance in fine woodworking. His first, a few issues earlier, had showed readers how to join cabinets with accurately bored and carefully hidden dowels, a technique many would have considered amateurish until the great man endorsed it. And we began to publish more books. In the summer of '77, the Baltimore lawyer John Alexander visited Taunton Press in search of a publisher for his green woodworking manuscript. This was all new terrain for me. I loved it, and in 1978, Alexander's Make a Chair from a Tree became fine woodworking's first regular technical handbook. Richard Starr and Paul Roman took most of the photos. Roger Barnes designed it, and I ran the edit through Alexander's ongoing new discoveries and consequent revisions. And I have the chair in my own collection that was made and photographed for that book. Our book editorial team, notably Laura Tringali and Deborah Canarella, became adept at coaxing books like this from across the woodworking and furniture-making communities. Michael Dunbar's Make a Windsor Chair, in 1984, was published toward the end of my magazine editorship, and I also have the green continuous arm Windsor that was made and photographed for that book. Another influence was Toshio Odate, a shoji maker, wood sculptor, conceptual artist who lived nearby in Woodbury, Connecticut, on rural acreage bordering the Pomperaug River. Odate had led an unusual life. He was apprenticed in Japan during World War II, trained as a designer after the war, and in the early 1950s he was sent back to America as an ambassador for the New Japan. He was meant to go back home, and he retained strong ties to Japan, but Odate stepped off the official plan and he stayed on here. He's best known for his classic book Japanese Woodworking Tools, 1982, which Taunton Press published. I worked with him on a variety of photography, magazine, and book projects, and today he is still active in the workshop at age 94. His deft and sharp style of work taught me that each woodworking tradition is a system unto itself. All of the elements, how you measure, cut, and join, and finish, work together within that system. You extract one or two things, and it maybe doesn't work quite so well. The cultural upheaval of the time threw up new opportunities to show and see contemporary work and to sell it. The Renwick, the Smithsonian's craft art gallery in Washington, opened in 1972 with a show called Wooden Works. In 1978, Warren and B.B. Johnson took a chance with their posh Pretam and Eames gallery in East Hampton, New York. Workbench, a chain of furniture stores, opened an art furniture gallery in Manhattan. There was Rick Kaufman's Art and Industry Gallery, Richard Kagan and the Snydermans in Philadelphia, the Society of Arts and Crafts in Boston, and a little later the Peter Joseph's Gallery, which commissioned work specifically for exhibition and probable or possible sale. For me at Fine Woodworking, these were all new places to see work and meet makers, new sources of authors to write about what they made and how they did it. And that big new market also spawned an immense bringing together of commercial interests, selling tools, wood, and tools, machines, and wood to woodworkers. The bubble and seed of the time and our growing circulation, alongside that of our new competitors, pointed to a large, untapped, and growing market for tools, machines, wood, and information. Garrett Wade and its founder Gary Chin and their Canadian partner Lee Valley, founded by Leonard Lee, pioneered print ads and direct mail to sell high-quality tools, mostly imported. Woodcraft Supply created a lush mail-order catalog and then expanded from a single store in Woburn, Massachusetts to a chain of 80-plus retail outlets. Wilkie Machinery, Grizzly Jet, and later on Harbor Freight sold Chinese-made machinery for every conceivable workshop purpose at significantly lower prices than their American and European competitors. Clearly there was money to be made in learning what woodworkers needed and wanted, finding or creating that, and selling lots of it to them. And for fine woodworking, new advertisers, new lists for subscription marketing, new retail outlets, and again, more stuff to write about. And we went on the road. The cultural moment threw up weekend woodworking exhibition marketplaces under a variety of sponsors. The editorial staff and I, along with our new marketing colleagues, attended to meet readers, sign up new subscribers, sell books, and troll for authors. And we encouraged our regular authors to become demonstrators. Tay Frid, who would not travel without his beloved wife Emma, always drew an eager crowd. This is all pre-internet and no YouTube, and so for most woodworkers, an event such as the one shown here, these two Excellence in Woodworking shows, was a great way, and maybe the only way, to see and buy new tools and meet people and learn techniques and get new ideas. And we went everywhere. The other cover is a shot I took in Mendocino, California in 1981. Mendocino turned out to be a hotbed of wood making. People who'd gone back to the land in the woods there and were producing some quite remarkable furniture and wood turning and carving. And there was at least one gallery there selling it, and several very sweet exhibition spaces. This fall 1980 Fine Woodworking back cover featured a maple writing desk with purple tenons by then student Wendy Maruyama, and a Paducah curio cabinet by the Oakland artist Gary Bennett, which had a bent nail driven into the small central door. To this day, I meet geezers who learn of my past, and they have to tell me about that was exactly when that damn magazine went off the rails. Now, last winter, 2024, I encountered Maruyama, now a very successful artist and educator, at her classy New York gallery opening. I asked how she had felt about all those critical letters to the editor and discussion that her work had inspired back in 1980. That's how I knew I was on the right track, she replied with a very wide grin. Paint, metal, plastic, decoration, negative space, narrative content, art and/or craft, luxury gewgaws or furniture for the masses, bubble, seethe, and boil. There was a lot going on, and we struggled to understand it. Artiture was the term coined by Arthur Espinay Carpenter in this 1983 feature. It didn't stick, but it was a good try. The term studio furniture didn't come into common use until probably the mid-90s. And meanwhile, on the business side, and beset by new competitors, market research ultimately compelled sanding down all the fascinating byways, making room for more beginner stories, router jigs, and basic workshop projects. And our third child, Ted, was born in 1977, and it's now 1984. I'm holding down a family of 5. I need to work differently so I can put more attention on raising my children. Fine Woodworking was built on the founder Paul Roman's conviction that only makers could explain making. We hired woodworkers and taught them how to be editors and photographers, and we only accepted authors who were themselves makers. We enjoyed a hot cultural moment. It was long hours' work. We traveled a lot to meet makers in their shops, and somehow we swallowed the transition from typewriters to computers. At the peak in the mid-1980s, Fine Woodworking had 250,000 paying print subscribers, 20 years before the internet. And we had the wood furniture domain to ourselves. And then all of a sudden, around 1984-85, our brand was beset by competitors and Me Too's. Wood, Woodsmith, Woodworking West, Woodshop News, American Woodworker, Popular Woodworking, Fine Home Building, Woodworks. In 1984, the press of new competitors forced a change, from printing in black and white to full color, and that needed new skills and a new perspective. I'd spent 8 years totally focused on building a great magazine for woodworkers and furniture makers, and I wanted to move on at the slower pace of magazine development and book publishing. Quite a number of our staff shown in this 1984 photograph also went on to illustrious careers. Paul Bertorelli succeeded me as editor-in-chief and then went on to edit private aviation publications and to lead flying tours. The late Jim Cummins befriended Jimmy Carter post-White House and shepherded Carter's several woodworking stories into print, notably his porch swing project. Rick Mastelli and Deborah Fillion, who had a torrid in-office love affair, went on to develop American Woodturner magazine for the American Association of Woodturners, where Dick Burrows later became editor. And Mastelli and Fillion later on formed their own project development company, Image and Word. David Sloan decamped to Rodale in Emmaus, PA, to be editor-publisher of American Woodworker magazine, a scrappy competitor, and later on to be editor-publisher, along with Norm Abrams, of This Old House magazine, published by Time Life. And for a few years, David had a glam office on 6th Avenue in Manhattan. Meanwhile, in this decade, with fine woodworking in other hands, I worked to capitalize upon and to repeat the magazine's original good fortune. From 85 to 88, I collaborated with Betsy Levine and a powerful team of women to develop Threads magazine. From 88 to 92, I expanded my horizons and timelines yet again as Taunton's publisher of books and videos, and I learned a lot about, the global publishing business. Daily newspapers which serve cities can be planned and built in a week, written and delivered in days and hours. Bi-monthly magazines, which serve national audiences, form a square 6x6 array in space and time. At every moment you're planning for the issue a full year away, soliciting stories for the next nearest, editing number 3, design and layout for number 4, printing number 5, and hearing feedback about number 6 from your readers. So it's a year-long wheel of calendars and lists. Illustrated non-fiction books, such as we were publishing, are planned years ahead and sold worldwide. But once the author has done writing and illustrating, it's usually and typically 9 months from manuscript delivered to printed book in stores. It's difficult to do it any faster, and not economic to do it much slower. And there were some fails. In 1993, in collaboration with the photographer Ted Spiegel, I wrote a book about contemporary metal sculpture. We hung out at the Talix Foundry in Beacon, New York, and watched the modeling and casting of work by Roy Lichtenstein, Tom Otternes, Jeff Koons, Frank Stella, and Bill Reed. But the project foundered. The publishers wanted it to be about art. We wanted it to be about art process, and the artists didn't want anybody to tell their secrets. And then in 1994, I spent much of the year in England working with the Guild of Master Craftsmen Publications. The idea was to try U.S.-style subscription marketing in England and also to establish a U.S. beachhead for their magazines on carving, wood turning, and cabinet making. But I was the weak link. I didn't have the skills that were needed, and I learned the truth of the old saw that England and America are two nations divided by a common language. They didn't understand me, and I didn't understand them either. In 1995, I became an independent bookseller, Cambium Books, peddling authentic information for woodworkers and furniture makers. We did a 64-page catalog twice a year, listing 1,500 pertinent titles sourced worldwide. We took our traveling bookstore to 10 wood and furniture making, furniture selling shows a year, including many Furniture Society annual conferences. It was a good business for 10 years. But by 2005, Amazon was able to offer lower prices and had nibbled us to death. Selling books had revealed empty spaces in the domain. Hey, let's start our own little publishing company. We had a pretty good list while it lasted, with books by Stephen Hogman, James Kranoff, Ian Kirby, Nala Wallen, Bob Lang, Kevin Fristad, and Ken Horner. I'm especially proud of Bob Lang's fine series of shop drawing books for craftsman era furniture. By the early 2000s, we had Cambium Books, Cambium Press, another business called Kelsey Print and Web. It all got very complicated. I'm coming up on age 60. I'm overextended, I'm exhausted, and I'm soon divorced. And in 2006, Cambium Press was sold and folded into Fox Chapel Publishing in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Hogman had attended the Royal College of Art in London, where David Pye taught, and in 1974 or maybe 75, he had introduced me to Pye's important little books on design and workmanship. In 1978, I was able to visit Pye at his home in Kent, England. Pye died in 93. 2 years later, in 95, the family put me in touch with David Herbert, and we collaborated to publish new U.S. and U.K. editions of both books. Many woodmakers have found it useful to consider Pye's analysis of free and regulated workmanship, along with his thoughts on the saggy marriage of form and function. And again, this is all also 50, 60 years on. And even in 2025, the meaty Mortise and Tenon magazine earnestly debates David Pye's ideas. And Christopher Schwartz at Lost Arts Press continues to pursue old ways of working wood and of thinking about it too. So conceptually, these are direct descendants. I made a lot of furniture for my own home and for the homes of my 3 children, as well as for our business offices, but I never did go into the woodworking or furniture business. In 1998 to 2001, working closely with my editorial colleagues Rick Mastelli and Deborah Fillion, and the furniture scholars Ned Cook and Glenn Adamson, we tried to define studio furniture through a groundbreaking pair of books shown at the top left. And then from 2002 through 2007, the Furniture Society and its many generous donors sponsored 3 more books in the series, created in collaboration with the Society's editorial committee members and the designer Maura Zimmer. I also wrote a few books on my own. Birdhouses, put together in 2003 to 4. It sold best, but my Kidcraft woodworking book in 2008 was my best book. The American Association of Woodturners commissioned Woodturning Today to mark their 25th anniversary, a 3-year project. And it also is a groundbreaking book with a lead-off essay by Steve Lord that it's still the best account I've seen of the evolution of woodturning in the 20th century. And more collaborations. The hot seat stool collaboration with Stephen Hogman was done for his 2012 book. He made the stool, I just wrote on it. I wrote The Hot Seat is Wherever You're Sitting, and we did a chapter in the book on collaborations, which have become very popular, especially in the woodturning community. And for a more personal collaboration in 2010, Tina Fruchter and I got married at home in Lancaster. At the time I was 64 and she was 58, and it's the second time around for us both. I turned 50 in 1996, with the internet rising through CompuServe and AOL. Meanwhile, the woodworking industry was turning to CNC computer-controlled routing machinery, which vastly changed the making of parts for furniture. And by the year 2000, everybody had a computer, and these technologies were filtering down to small shops and even to amateur woodworkers. I turned 60 in 2006, and by then it was clear that small business as we knew it would not survive e-commerce. So I took a late career job as editorial director for Fox Chapel Publishing. I stayed there in 2012, from 2008 to 2012, and retired at age 66. Ocean, lake, or river, I've usually lived on or near the water. Paddling a small boat, especially one that you built yourself, is relaxing and exhilarating, a tonic for the weary soul. In 2010, after making my living writing and editing for so many years, when I retired, I did not want to write anymore. It was time to make things. So I returned to woodturning. I got a small lathe, and I had a lot of fun investigating the expressive potential of basic spindles, both the shapes and the spaces in between them. In 2013, I became the documentarian for the eight-week International Turning Exchange program in Philadelphia. It was full-time, and it was an intensive immersion that gave me a glimpse of the working life of the furniture-making fork in the road that I had not taken back in 1976. And that summer, my younger brother Robin, who also was a woodworker and writer, died in Peterborough, Ontario at age 64. I got very interested in the furniture applications of all wood lift mechanisms based on 4-bar linkages with turn pivots. A lot of potential. But I probably won't take it much further than this tool cabinet, which I still use in my shop. It holds all of my wood turning tools. And there is a video on my YouTube channel that shows about how to make the lift and how this cabinet works. It's not embedded in this presentation, however. And I found that my friends had publishing projects that needed some help, and I had the publishing skills that could help. So I enjoyed a number of editorial collaborations and marketing collaborations. We learned in those years especially that print on demand is really the only way to go. It doesn't do you any good to chase a low unit cost and have thousands of books in your garage for the rest of your life. But in 2019, at age 73, my health failed, and I fully retired to focus on my own projects. I like to make sets of practical tableware that people can use. I like to see my work in their homes. I like to work in local hardwoods, although one time I stumbled onto a huge bunch of cocobolo at an auction, so I made a lot of things like the sake set shown in the upper right there. But mostly I work in pear and cherry and walnut, the woods I can get around here, and maple and mulberry. I've made a lot of candy jars and urns and medicine jars. The authorities consider Bradford pear to be invasive and problematic, but it's really great to turn. It dries hard with very little showy figure and a subtle range of colors and patterns. And in the 4 urns shown in the upper left there, I've made sure to leave a small patch of the cambium layer and a little wee bit of the inner bark from the tree on the outside of each of the urns. It shows me where they came from. Shows you too. I've always been very interested in Platonic solids and related geometric forms, and around 2016 I discovered that you could make some really credible models using turned spindles with magnets embedded in the ends and spherical magnets. We're talking now about the new high intensity magnets that you can now get. Makes me think about, and is in the same vein, I guess, as Buckminster Fuller or geodesic domes, tensegrity structures, the sculpture Kenneth Snelson. These things fascinate me. And I continue to make collaborations. You're seeing an early version of the harmonograph table. This one I built with my friend Lawrence Souder. Harmonograph is a 3-pendulum contraption. 2 pendulums drive the pen, and 1 drives the platen with the paper on it. And with the pendulums about the right length, but not quite, with little bits of differences in their lengths, you get patterns like the one shown in the center here. And in this part of my life, I'm discovering that one's horizons narrow, but friendly collaborations like these, making something clever with and for a friend, are nourishing and a lot of fun. I also got very interested in sphericons. The sphericon, or twisted double cone, is a geometric investigation, and it builds upon the work of the late David Springett, a British master turner and author of 4 or 5 skill-building books. Well, in 2018, I was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer, and I learned that the gland is shaped pretty much like a sphericon, and these things took on a mystic significance. When I gave one to a local shaman named Cougar, he handled it with gloves and tongs, burned it, and buried the ash in the woods. Didn't cure me, though. 2018-2019, in my early 70s, I took on editing the American Association of Woodturning's Woodturning Fundamentals bi-monthly digital publication in order to bring it up to the professional standard of AAW's flagship journal, American Woodturner. We did 6 issues a year, a total of 300 pages a year. My career last magazine publishing project. When I was a little kid, my dad owned a weekly newspaper in Alberta. He set all the type by hand, letter by letter. And then he got a linotype machine, which could compose and cast complete lines in hot metal. The linotype was still in general use when I was at university, but fine woodworking was entirely photoset, and then Woodturning Fundamentals was entirely digital. It doesn't exist in print at all. Digital typesetting and printing meant anybody with a laptop could handle the whole process. Some people thought that meant you would do without editors and other gatekeepers, but as we now see in unmoderated social media, not so much. Garbage in, garbage out. On the woodworking side, It went from radial arm saw and table saw to compound miter chop saw and track saw to CNC machine. But again, a bad design won't be improved by building it with the hottest, latest tech. In 2021, I took on the home improvement project with the carpenter Terry Sharp of building a fair-sized deck outside our house in Lancaster. Terry made the platform, I made the posts and the railings and the balustrade of 118 caryatids out of turned cypress. The deck surrounds Yggdrasil, our guardian white ash tree. We inoculate old Yiggy against the always fatal emerald ash beetle, while our 3 vigorous walnut trees have beaten the ravenous spotted lanternfly. My meditation is closely observing our trees in their daily and seasonal lives. And turning multiples is another kind of meditation. As Richard Raffin points out, you don't turn 100 of anything. You turn one, and then you turn another. Lately, I've been making small pocket pillboxes held closed by concealed, radially oriented rare earth magnets. They open with a twist, and they close with a satisfying wood-on-wood clack. Visitors to my shop often ask to buy one, but no, I give them away in exchange for a photo. I don't want to measure out my workshop projects in hours and dollars. I have to keep it fun. And I have to not care about how long it takes. 2020, COVID. In COVID isolation, after testing live video setups in my basement shop, Lancaster area woodturners installed a 3-camera live video Zoom setup and committed to the hybrid meeting format. And during COVID and using Zoom, the club grew from 40 members to more than 100. So it proves the concept. And since April 2020, I've been moderator and host of a weekly Thursday morning woodturners coffee hour on Zoom with 50 or more regular attendees and hundreds of YouTube views. You can see my many videos on YouTube. Look up John Kelsey Artisan and you'll stumble into my playlists. Fine Woodworking, meanwhile, turns 50 this year. After Paul Roman died early in 24, the family sold the magazine to Active Interest Media, which also publishes the competitor Popular Woodworking. There's no office anymore. The staff works from home. John Bisden, who joined the staff in 1992 just as I was leaving, still works there today. So the magazine is coming up on 50 years old, and it's still dense with exploded drawings, photo sequences at the router, and table saw projects and techniques. But there's not very many quirky byways into adjacent woodcrafts, nor personality interviews, and no delightful surprises. To my eye, it's just not as interesting as it once was. My 3 kids are also cresting on 50. Back in those fine woodworking days when I traveled and worked late a lot, my kids took the hit. They came through it pretty good, though. From left, you can see Morgan, who's a luthier, Ted, who's an educator, and Jennifer, who sells research lab equipment. This is a 2019 photo. And I've got 5 grandchildren if you'd like to see some more photos. So, the conference theme was place and also time. Time. I'm an early riser. I like to see the sun come up. I learned this in middle school when I had an early morning newspaper route and my dad worked the overnight shift. We'd both get home about the same time and enjoy breakfast together. My dad's on my mind much now because I'm now the age he was at the end. At the time of the Furniture Society conference in June, the sun will have risen 28,856 times in my 79 years. I'm near the end of a long life, and I've got to be grateful for every morning that Tato the cat and I see the old man sun peep over the eastern horizon outside my breakfast window. And place. I live in Lancaster County by the Conestoga River with my wife Tina and our handsome cat. The ash tree Yggdrasil rises up through our deck from the center of the 7 realms to stand guard over our little house. Our land slopes down to the river with mature pin oak, white ash, black walnut, English walnut, forest cherry, Bradford pear, sycamore, and mulberry trees, a meadow forest community with its own intelligence and intentions, season upon season. I can only watch in wonder. So here we are at the award of distinction. When a cultural moment sweeps by, you can catch the train and ride it, but you mustn't imagine that you created the moment. It is true that only makers can properly explain the process of making, and it's also true that you can't bang out quality books and magazines by yourself. It takes time and a team. I'm grateful to be receiving this award of distinction, and in accepting, I represent a legion of wood-making soldiers in the trenches of ink, craft artisans and writers like this fine woodworking platoon for work we did 50 years ago and ongoing. Thank you.